Ashley Cooper stared at the unfamiliar lipstick smudge on Edward's collar with a heaviness in her chest that seemed to steal her breath away. Blood red, not her signature mauve, stark against the crisp white fabric she had lovingly ironed just 2 days ago. In that moment, standing alone in their bedroom with the evidence pinched between her trembling fingers, the world she had carefully built over the last 2 years began to crumble around her. The man she had married at 41, whom she had believed was her last chance at happiness, was now nothing more than another statistic in the book of marital betrayal. "How cliché," she whispered to the empty room, her green eyes brimming with unshed tears. The sunlight streaming through the large bay windows highlighted the auburn highlights in her chestnut hair. A recent birthday gift to herself that Edward had barely noticed. Ashley Cooper, a strong, independent woman of 43, who had inherited her grandmother's beautiful colonial house, who couldn't have children of her own, who had poured all her maternal love into her husband's family, had become the unwitting fool in a story as old as time. The signs had been accumulating like storm clouds on the horizon of their marriage. Edward's sudden late nights at the office, the mysterious business trips that yielded no souvenirs, the secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, the unexplained charges at restaurants too expensive for casual client meetings, and finally, that perfume, young, floral, and inexpensive, clinging to his clothes when he returned home with a distant look in his eyes. "I don't even know who he is anymore," Ashley confessed to the framed wedding photo on their dresser, tracing the outline of their smiling faces with her fingertip. 2 years of marriage, preceded by a whirlwind romance that had swept her off her feet when she least expected it. Edward Cooper, the charming sales manager with the infectious laugh and ambitious plans, had promised her the world. Now he was giving pieces of himself to someone else. The evidence solidified on a Tuesday evening in April, when she decided to surprise him at work. She had prepared his favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, packed it neatly in Tupperware containers, and driven downtown to his office building. Edward had texted earlier, claiming another late night finalizing a big account. She had smiled at the screen, proud of his dedication, completely unaware of the truth waiting for her on the 12th floor of the glass corporate tower. The elevator doors slid open silently, revealing the deserted reception area. The cleaning staff had already come and gone, leaving behind the faint scent of lemon polish and emptied trash bins. Ashley's heels clicked against the marble flooring as she made her way toward Edward's corner office. The warm food container clutched against her chest like armor. 10 feet from his door, she heard it. Laughter, female, young, and intimate, followed by Edward's low murmur. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the voice he once used with her, in their early days of dating, before marriage had dulled their passion into comfortable routine. Ashley froze, her body suddenly cold despite the warm spring evening. "You're being paranoid," she whispered to herself, forcing her feet to continue forward. "It's just a colleague, a client, anyone but what you're thinking." 3 feet from the door, which was slightly ajar, casting a sliver of golden light into the darkened hallway, she heard Edward's distinct chuckle, the one that started deep in his chest and bubbled up like champagne. "Jessica, you're going to be the death of me," he purred, his voice thick with desire. Jessica. The name hit Ashley like a physical blow. Jessica Palmer, the 29-year-old marketing coordinator who had joined the company 8 months ago, the ambitious blonde with perfect teeth and a body that hadn't yet known the softening effects of middle age. The woman who had complimented Ashley's earrings at the Christmas party while standing too close to her husband. With trembling fingers, Ashley pushed the door open wider, just enough to confirm what her heart already knew. There they were, Edward sitting in his leather executive chair, Jessica perched on his lap, her blouse unbuttoned, his hand caressing her exposed skin with the same tenderness he had once reserved for his wife. The salmon dinner slipped from Ashley's grasp, crashing to the floor with a dull thud. Two heads whipped toward the doorway, 4 wide eyes locked onto her stunned face. "Ashley!" Edward's voice cracked with panic. Jessica scrambled off his lap, frantically working at her buttons, her face flushing crimson. "This isn't. I can explain." But Ashley was already backing away, her vision blurring, her world collapsing into a singularity of pain. She turned and ran, ignoring Edward's calls, fleeing from the evidence of her shattered marriage. The following days passed in a haze of grief and rage. Edward's desperate explanations, his pathetic excuses about a momentary lapse in judgment, and meaningless physical attraction fell on deaf ears. Ashley moved into the guest bedroom, communicating with him only when absolutely necessary. While he believed she was processing her anger, preparing for either forgiveness or divorce, Ashley was meticulously crafting a plan, one worthy of the betrayal she had suffered. Edward's 48th birthday was approaching. For months, she had been organizing a surprise party with his family. His mother, Martha, who treated Ashley like the daughter she never had. His father, Will, a man of few but meaningful words. His sister, Bethany, and her sweet 6-year-old son, Nathan, whom Ashley adored like her own child. The family that had embraced her completely, filling the void left by her own deceased parents. The thought of losing them in a divorce hurt almost as much as Edward's infidelity. "The party will go on," Ashley whispered to herself as she lay alone in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling, but with a different kind of surprise. 1 week before the birthday weekend, Ashley approached Edward in the kitchen. She had applied her makeup carefully, concealing the dark circles beneath her eyes, and chosen a dress he had always admired, emerald green, matching her eyes. "I've been offered a leadership conference in Chicago," she said, stirring her morning coffee with measured calmness. "It's this weekend." Edward looked up from his phone, surprise evident in his expression. "This weekend? But it's my birthday on Saturday." Ashley feigned distress, biting her lower lip. "I know, and I'm devastated. I tried to reschedule, but it's a career-changing opportunity. All the senior management will be there." She reached across the island counter to touch his hand. "I'm so sorry, Edward. We'll celebrate when I get back." The relief that flashed across his features, so brief yet so unmistakable, confirmed everything. He squeezed her hand, his acting nearly as convincing as hers. "Of course you should go. Don't worry about me. We can celebrate later." That night, as Edward slept, Ashley carefully checked his phone. He hadn't bothered to delete his messages to Jessica, secure in his belief that Ashley never invaded his privacy. The texts confirmed her suspicions. Edward had already invited his mistress to spend his birthday weekend at their home, in their bed, while Ashley was supposedly away at her conference. "I can't wait to celebrate properly with you," he had written. "The house to ourselves all weekend. No interruptions." Jessica had responded with suggestive emojis and the promise of making his birthday unforgettable. Ashley smiled grimly in the darkness of their living room. "Oh, it will be unforgettable, all right," she whispered to the glowing screen, "for everyone involved." The week passed with excruciating slowness. Ashley packed a suitcase, arranged for a taxi to the airport, and kissed Edward goodbye on Saturday morning with all the tenderness she could muster. His embrace was brief, his eyes already distant, undoubtedly counting the minutes until Jessica's arrival. "I love you," Ashley said, searching his face for any remnant of the man she had married. "Love you too," Edward replied automatically, helping her load the suitcase into the taxi. "Have a good flight." The taxi pulled away from their beautiful colonial house, but instead of heading to the airport, Ashley directed the driver to Martha and Will Cooper's home across town. Her in-laws welcomed her with warm embraces, completely unaware of the marital crisis unfolding between their son and daughter-in-law. "Edward will be so surprised," Martha said, her eyes twinkling with excitement as she pulled a homemade birthday cake from the refrigerator. He has no idea we're all coming over tonight. No idea at all, Ashley agreed, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hours later, as evening approached, Ashley's heart pounded wildly in her chest as she gathered Edward's family in the living room for a final briefing before their departure. The surprise party was about to become something none of them had anticipated. "I've set up a special entrance," she explained, keeping her voice steady. "We'll go in through the back door and up to the bedroom where Edward is probably relaxing. When we all burst in singing Happy Birthday, he'll be completely shocked." The family nodded enthusiastically, especially little Nathan, who clutched a hand-drawn birthday card for his uncle. As they piled into 2 cars and drove toward Ashley and Edward's home, she checked her phone one last time. The hidden camera she had installed showed Edward and Jessica already in the house, champagne glasses in hand, heading upstairs to the master bedroom. Ashley closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself for what was to come. The perfect revenge was minutes away, public, devastating, and irrefutable. Edward Cooper was about to learn the true meaning of surprise. The convoy of 2 family cars pulled into the neighborhood just as dusk was settling over the tree-lined street. Ashley guided Martha's sedan to park around the corner from the house, far enough away that Edward wouldn't notice unexpected vehicles from their bedroom window. The spring evening was pleasantly cool, with cherry blossoms scenting the air, a beautiful backdrop for the ugly scene about to unfold. "Remember, absolute silence until we get upstairs," Ashley reminded everyone as they gathered on the sidewalk. 6-year-old Nathan nodded solemnly, his small hands clutching both the homemade card and a wrapped present. Will carried the birthday cake, chocolate with buttercream frosting, Edward's childhood favorite that Martha still baked for him every year. Bethany held a gift bag containing an expensive watch they had all pitched in to buy. "This is so exciting," Martha whispered, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. At 67, she still maintained the enthusiasm of someone much younger, especially when it came to family gatherings. She squeezed Ashley's hand. "You're such a wonderful wife to arrange this, even when you should be at your conference." The guilt that flashed through Ashley's heart was quickly extinguished by the memory of Edward's betrayal. She returned Martha's squeeze with a tight smile. "Family comes first," she replied, the double meaning of her words lost on her mother-in-law. They approached from the back of the house, using the garden path that led to the kitchen door. Ashley unlocked it with deliberate slowness, wincing at each small sound. The kitchen was immaculate. She had cleaned it thoroughly that morning, a habit she couldn't break even when her world was crumbling. 2 empty wine glasses sat in the sink, evidence of the celebration already underway upstairs. Will raised an eyebrow at the glasses, but said nothing. Perceptive as always, he seemed to sense something was off, but his natural reservation kept him from voicing his concerns. Bethany was preoccupied with keeping Nathan quiet, while Martha beamed with maternal joy, oblivious to the tension crackling around her daughter-in-law. "Up the back stairs," Ashley mouthed silently, pointing to the narrow staircase that servants had once used in the century-old house. It was steeper and creaked more than the main staircase, but it led directly to the hallway outside the master bedroom, perfect for their ambush. The family followed in a single file, Ashley first, then Nathan and Bethany, followed by Martha and Will bringing up the rear with the cake. Each step seemed to echo in Ashley's ears. Though she knew the sound was likely masked by the television she could now hear playing in the bedroom. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm her as she imagined what Edward and Jessica might be doing behind that closed door. As they reached the top of the stairs, Ashley paused, her hand hovering over the bedroom doorknob. For a split second, she considered turning around, sparing Edward's family the trauma of what they were about to witness. But the memory of Edward's casual betrayal, the ease with which he had invited another woman into their bed, steeled her resolve. On 3, we burst in singing "Happy Birthday," she whispered to the family clustered behind her. Nathan nodded eagerly, practically bouncing with excitement. 1, 2, Ashley turned the knob, and flung the door open wide. "3!" she announced loudly, stepping into the room with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Happy birth!" The family's enthusiastic chorus died in collective gasps and shocked silence. The scene that greeted them was exactly as Ashley had anticipated, yet somehow even more devastating in its reality. Edward and Jessica were indeed in bed. Their bed, limbs entangled in sheets that Ashley had washed just days before. Jessica's blonde hair was spread across Ashley's pillow, her clothes scattered across Ashley's carpet. Edward's shocked face emerged from beneath the covers, his expression morphing from irritation to recognition to absolute horror in the span of 3 seconds. "Oh my God!" Jessica shrieked, yanking the sheet up to cover herself, her eyes wild with panic as she registered the presence of not just Ashley, but an entire family staring at them in shock. "What the hell?" Edward shouted, his face draining of color as he locked eyes with his father, whose stoic expression had hardened into stone. The birthday cake slipped from Will's hands, landing with a dull thud on the hardwood floor, chocolate frosting splattering across the polished surface. Martha's hand flew to her mouth, a strangled sound escaping her throat. Bethany quickly turned Nathan away, covering his eyes. But the damage was done. "Uncle Eddie has a friend in his bed," Nathan announced in the piercing clarity of childhood innocence. Why is she naked? The absurdity of the moment. The family dressed in their party clothes, the fallen cake, the cheating couple frantically grabbing for clothes, might have been comical if it weren't so heartbreaking. Ashley stood perfectly still in the center of it all, a calm eye in the hurricane of chaos she had orchestrated. "Surprise," she said softly, meeting Edward's panicked gaze with cold determination. Martha began to sway on her feet, her complexion ashen. I don't," she mumbled, before her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Will caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently to the floor, as he called her name with increasing urgency. "Mom!" Edward scrambled from the bed, tangled in sheets, falling unceremoniously to the floor before staggering to his feet in just his boxers. "Jesus Christ, Ashley! What have you done?" he hissed, rushing to his mother's side. "What have I done?" Ashley's voice was deadly quiet. "That's really what you're asking right now, Edward." Bethany had rushed Nathan from the room, her shocked sobs audible from the hallway. Jessica was frantically gathering her clothes, her face burning with humiliation as she tried to dress beneath the covers. "Mrs. Cooper? Martha?" Ashley knelt beside her mother-in-law, genuine concern breaking through her cold facade. She had wanted to expose Edward's betrayal, but she hadn't anticipated Martha's collapse. "Will, should we call an ambulance?" Will shook his head, his weathered face tight with anger and concern. "She's breathing normally, just fainted from shock." He turned to his son, 67 years of disappointment concentrated in his glare. "Put some clothes on, for God's sake." Edward backed away, grabbing pants from a nearby chair. Jessica had managed to pull on her dress, though it was inside out and backwards. She looked desperately for an escape route, finding none except the door where Bethany stood with Nathan, blocking the way. I need to," Jessica stammered, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. "You need to get the hell out of my house," Ashley stated flatly, not even looking at the younger woman. "Now." Edward, now partially dressed, ran his hands through his disheveled hair. "Ashley, this isn't what it looks like." "Save it," Will interrupted, his voice like thunder in the tense room. "Your mother is coming around." Martha's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to remembrance as she looked from Ashley to Edward to the half-dressed woman cowering by the window. "Oh," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Oh, Edward, what have you done?" The simple question, coming from his mother rather than his wife, seemed to pierce Edward's defensive armor. He stood frozen, shame washing over his features as the full impact of his actions registered in his parents' devastated expressions. Jessica seized the momentary distraction to edge toward the door. "I'm leaving," she announced to no one in particular, then slipped past Bethany, and fled down the hallway. The sound of her heels on the stairs, followed by the slam of the front door, punctuated her exit. "I made a mistake," Edward finally said, his voice hollow. "It didn't mean anything. Ashley, please." "How long?" Will's question cut through Edward's excuses like a blade. "How long has this been going on?" Edward stared at his feet, unable to meet his father's eyes. 3 months, he admitted quietly. 8 months, Ashley corrected, helping Martha to sit up. "Since the Christmas party. I checked your messages, Edward. All of them." Martha began to cry softly, leaning against Will for support. "In your own home," she whispered. "In the bed you share with your wife." Bethany returned to the doorway, her eyes red, but her expression hardened into disgust as she looked at her brother. "Nathan is downstairs watching TV with his headphones on," she said stiffly. "I told him Uncle Edward was having an adult problem, and we needed to give him privacy." "Thank you," Ashley said quietly, genuine gratitude in her voice. Despite everything, she still wanted to protect her nephew from the ugly reality of adult betrayal. "I don't understand," Martha said, looking up at Ashley with confused, tear-filled eyes. "Your conference in Chicago." "There was no conference," Ashley explained gently. "I found out about the affair last week. Edward thought I was out of town, so he invited Jessica here to celebrate his birthday in our bed." "Eek. While your entire family was planning a surprise party for you," Will added, his voice thick with disappointment. "Your mother spent 2 days baking that cake." He nodded toward the ruined dessert on the floor. Edward sank down onto the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said, his voice muffled. "Oh, I think you meant exactly for this to happen," Bethany snapped, gesturing around the room. "You just didn't mean to get caught." An uncomfortable silence descended, broken only by Martha's quiet sniffling. Ashley felt strangely detached, as if she were watching the scene unfold in a movie, rather than living it. The revenge she had so carefully orchestrated had succeeded beyond her expectations, yet the victory felt hollow in the face of her in-laws' pain. "I think we should go," Will finally said, helping Martha to her feet. "You've got things to discuss, and this isn't the time or place for family to be present." "No," Ashley said suddenly, surprising herself. "Please don't leave on his account." She turned to Edward, her voice steady. "You should go. Pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay tonight." Edward looked up, shock written across his features. "This is my house, too." "Actually," Ashley replied calmly, "it's my grandmother's house that I inherited. Your name isn't even on the deed. We talked about adding it last year, remember? But we never got around to it." "Seat." The color drained from Edward's face as the implications sank in. After a moment of tense silence, he nodded slowly and stood up. "I'll get some things." As Edward moved toward the closet, stepping awkwardly around the ruined cake, Martha reached for Ashley's hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her eyes still brimming with tears. "We raised him better than this." "I know you did," Ashley replied, squeezing the older woman's hand. "This isn't your fault." "Or mine," she added, the realization washing over her with surprising clarity. For the first time since discovering the affair, she felt the heavy weight of self-doubt lifting from her shoulders. She hadn't driven Edward to cheat. She hadn't failed as a wife. The failure was entirely his. Will helped Martha into the hallway, his arm protectively around her shoulders. Bethany lingered in the doorway, watching as Edward stuffed clothes into an overnight bag with jerky, desperate movements. "I'll take Mom and Dad home," Bethany said quietly to Ashley. "Nathan and I can stay with you tonight if you want company." Ashley nodded gratefully. "I'd like that." As the family retreated downstairs, Edward zipped his bag closed and turned to face Ashley. They stood on opposite sides of the room, the fallen cake between them. A fitting metaphor for their ruined celebration of love. "I never wanted to hurt you," Edward said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Funny how that works," Ashley replied, crossing her arms over her chest. "You chose to sleep with another woman in our bed, yet somehow you never wanted to hurt me. The math doesn't add up, Edward." He flinched at her words, but had no defense to offer. "What happens now?" Ashley looked around the room, their room, which now felt tainted by his betrayal. The anger that had fueled her elaborate revenge was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and, surprisingly, a flicker of relief. The worst had happened, and she was still standing. "Now you leave," she said simply. "Tomorrow we can talk about divorce attorneys." Edward's shoulders sagged in defeat. He picked up his bag and moved toward the door, pausing when he drew even with her. "I do love you, Ashley, despite everything." She met his gaze steadily, searching for the man she had married 2 years ago. All she found was a stranger wearing his face. "No, Edward," she said softly. "You love yourself. That's the problem." He had no response to that. With a final nod, he walked out of the bedroom and down the stairs. The front door opened and closed with a definitive click that echoed through the now silent house. Ashley stood alone in the bedroom, surveying the aftermath of her revenge. The sheets would need to be burned, not just washed. The cake would leave a stain on the hardwood. The memory of this night would forever color her relationship with Edward's family, for better or worse. She had gambled everything on this moment of vindication, exposing not just Edward's betrayal, but her own capacity for calculated retribution. As she knelt to clean up the ruined cake, she wondered if the price had been too high. Downstairs, she heard the front door open again, followed by Bethany's voice and Nathan's excited chatter. Her nephew's innocent question floated up the stairs. "Did Uncle Eddie like our surprise?" Despite everything, Ashley found herself smiling. No, Edward certainly hadn't liked the surprise. But maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what they had all needed. 3 days after the disastrous birthday revelation, Ashley sat across from her lawyer in a downtown office that smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. Eleanor Hastings, a sharp-featured woman in her early 60s with a reputation for handling high-profile divorces, studied Ashley over the rim of her reading glasses. "So you have documentation of the affair, witnesses to the infidelity including his own family members, and the property is solely in your name," Eleanor summarized, tapping her Mont Blanc pen against the legal pad. "Mr. Cooper doesn't have much of a leg to stand on, Mrs. Cooper. Or should I start calling you Ms. Powell?" Ashley felt a small thrill at the sound of her maiden name, a name she hadn't used in 2 years, but which now represented a return to herself. "Powell," she confirmed. "I'd like to start the process of legally changing back to Powell as soon as possible." Eleanor nodded and made a note. "That can be arranged simultaneously with the divorce proceedings. Now, regarding the division of assets." As her lawyer outlined the steps ahead, Ashley found her mind drifting to the aftermath of Edward's departure. That night, after cleaning up the ruined cake and changing the bedsheets, she had sat in the kitchen with Bethany and Nathan, eating ice cream straight from the container, while Nathan regaled them with stories from his kindergarten class, blissfully unaware of the adult drama unfolding around him. "Aunt Ashley," he had asked between spoonfuls of chocolate chip, "will Uncle Eddie live somewhere else now?" The innocent question had pierced her heart. "Yes, sweetheart," she'd answered truthfully. "Uncle Eddie and I won't be living together anymore." Nathan had considered this with the serious contemplation only a 6-year-old could muster. "Is it because he had that lady in your bed?" "Mommy said that was very bad manners." Bethany had nearly choked on her ice cream, while Ashley had struggled not to laugh at the massive understatement. "Yes, that's part of it," she'd confirmed. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that can't be fixed with just an apology." Nathan had nodded sagely, as if this aligned perfectly with his worldview. "Like when I broke Mommy's special vase from Grandma and tried to glue it back together with peanut butter. That had broken the tension, sending both women into fits of much-needed laughter. Later, after Nathan had fallen asleep in the guest room, Bethany had embraced Ashley tightly. "You're still my sister," she'd whispered fiercely. "No matter what happens with you and Eddie, you're family to us." "Mrs. Powell?" Eleanor's voice pulled Ashley back to the present. "Do you have any questions about the temporary restraining order?" Ashley blinked, refocusing on her lawyer. "I'm sorry, the what?" Eleanor frowned slightly. "The temporary restraining order we discussed. Given Mr. Cooper's behavior when he returned to the house yesterday," the memory flooded back. Edward showing up unannounced, clearly intoxicated, demanding to speak with her. When she'd refused to let him in, he'd pounded on the door for 20 minutes, shouting accusations and apologies in equal measure, until a neighbor threatened to call the police. "Yes, of course," Ashley said, straightening in her seat. "I don't think he would hurt me physically, but the emotional harassment is difficult. Better safe than sorry," Eleanor replied crisply, adding another note to her growing list. "Now, one last thing before you go. These situations tend to get worse before they get better. People show their true colors when cornered." The older woman removed her glasses, fixing Ashley with a penetrating stare. "Are you prepared for that?" Was she prepared? Ashley considered the question carefully. She had orchestrated a public humiliation of her husband, thrown him out of their home, and was now preparing to divorce him and take back her former identity. Each step had required courage she hadn't known she possessed until tested. "Yes," she answered with quiet conviction. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Eleanor's stern expression softened slightly. "Good. Most clients come in here broken. You, Mrs. Powell, strike me as someone who's already started putting herself back together." The observation stayed with Ashley as she left the lawyer's office and stepped into the bright spring sunshine. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, he felt a sense of purpose and clarity. The pain of Edward's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it had crystallized into something she could examine from a distance, rather than something that threatened to consume her from within. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text as she walked to her car. Martha Cooper's name flashed on the screen. "Lunch today? Just us girls. I need to see you." Ashley hesitated only briefly before responding. "I'd love that. The usual place at 1 o'clock?" The usual place was a small French cafe they had discovered together last summer, a cozy spot with excellent quiche and discreet seating that allowed for private conversations. As Ashley drove there, she wondered what her mother-in-law, soon-to-be former mother-in-law, wanted to discuss. Martha was already waiting when Ashley arrived, seated at their favorite corner table with 2 glasses of iced tea. At 67, Martha Cooper maintained the elegant poise that had once made her the darling of local society pages in her younger years. Today, however, she looked tired, the events of recent days etched in the deeper lines around her eyes. "Ashley, dear." Martha stood to embrace her, holding on a moment longer than usual. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Ashley replied, settling into her seat. "How are you holding up?" Martha sighed, stirring her tea absently. "As well as can be expected when your son has proven himself to be an absolute fool." She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "But I didn't ask you here to talk about Edward. I wanted to make sure you're all right, and to tell you something important." Their waiter approached to take their order, providing a momentary reprieve from the emotional conversation. After requesting their usual quiche Lorraine for Martha, niçoise salad for Ashley, Martha reached across the table to take Ashley's hand. "Will and I want you to know that we consider you our daughter," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just our daughter-in-law or Edward's wife, but our daughter in your own right. What Edward did was unforgivable, and we won't pretend otherwise to spare his feelings." Ashley felt tears welling in her eyes. "That means more to me than you know," she whispered. "I've been so afraid of losing you and Will and Bethany and Nathan. After my parents died, you became my family." "And we still are," Martha insisted firmly. "Nothing changes that." She paused, taking a sip of her tea before continuing. "Edward came to see us yesterday. He wants us to help him win you back." Ashley stiffened. "And what did you tell him?" Martha's expression hardened in a way Ashley had never seen before. "I told him he made his bed, quite literally, and now he must lie in it, alone. She shook her head sadly. Will hasn't spoken a word to him since that night. 50 years of working to raise a good man, and this is how he repays our efforts. Their food arrived, though neither woman had much appetite. They picked at their meals in companionable silence for a few minutes before Martha spoke again. There's something else you should know, she said carefully. Edward claims the affair is over, that Jessica ended things after the incident, but I have reason to believe otherwise. Ashley set down her fork. What do you mean? Bethany saw them together yesterday, outside Jessica's apartment building, Martha explained, lowering her voice despite the relative privacy of their table. He was bringing her flowers. Apology flowers, I assume, for involving her in his public humiliation. The news shouldn't have hurt. After all, Ashley was pursuing a divorce, had already reclaimed her maiden name in her heart, if not yet legally. But something sharp and painful twisted in her chest, nevertheless. I see, she managed to say. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, Martha said gently, but I thought you deserved to know exactly what kind of man you're dealing with. Ashley nodded, grateful for the honesty even as she processed this new betrayal. Edward was still seeing Jessica, even after everything that had happened. The realization solidified her resolve like nothing else could have. Thank you for telling me, she said, reaching for her water glass to cool the sudden heat in her throat. It helps, actually. Makes everything clearer. Martha studied her for a moment. You're a remarkable woman, Ashley Powell. I always thought Edward didn't quite deserve you. Now I know for certain. They finished their lunch with lighter conversation. Martha's garden plans for summer, Bethany's consideration of returning to college now that Nathan was in school full-time. As they prepared to leave, Martha handed Ashley a small velvet box. I want you to have this, she said, pushing it across the table. It was my grandmother's. Ashley opened the box to find a delicate sapphire pendant on a silver chain, the blue stone catching the light in hypnotic facets. Martha, I couldn't possibly. You can, and you will, Martha interrupted firmly. It was always meant for my daughter, and that's you. The tears Ashley had been holding back spilled over as she clutched the beautiful gift. Thank you, she whispered, unable to find words adequate for the depth of her gratitude. Outside the cafe, they embraced once more before heading to their respective cars. As Ashley drove home, the sapphire pendant nestled in her purse, she felt a curious lightness despite the emotional weight of their conversation. The Cooper family, minus Edward, was still hers. He hadn't lost everything after all. The house was quiet when she returned, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Ashley moved through the rooms slowly, seeing the space with new eyes. This was her grandmother's legacy, a home filled with history and character, and now it would be truly hers alone. No more compromising on decoration, no more deferring to Edward's preferences, no more walking on eggshells around his moods. In the master bedroom, she surveyed the king-sized bed that still held echoes of betrayal, despite the new sheets and duvet she had purchased. Perhaps it was time for a complete overhaul. New furniture, new paint colors, new energy, a physical manifestation of her internal transformation. The doorbell rang, startling her from her renovation plans. Through the peephole, she saw Edward standing on the porch, looking uncharacteristically disheveled in wrinkled clothes, his normally perfect hair uncombed. I know you're in there, Ashley, he called through the door when she didn't immediately answer. Your car is in the driveway. Please, just 5 minutes. Ashley considered ignoring him, but decided it would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Better to face it head-on and establish clear boundaries now. She opened the door, but remained firmly in the threshold, blocking his entry. What do you want, Edward? He seemed taken aback by her direct question, as if he had expected tears or recriminations. I wanted to talk to you. About us. There is no us anymore, Ashley replied calmly. My lawyer filed the divorce papers this morning. You should be receiving your copy soon. Edward's expression crumpled. Don't do this, Ash. We can fix this. People make mistakes. Marriages survive affairs all the time. Is that what Jessica told you when you brought her flowers yesterday? Ashley asked, watching his face closely. Or were you too busy comforting her about being caught in our bed to discuss relationship philosophy? His shock at being caught in another lie was evident. How did you— It doesn't matter, Ashley interrupted. What matters is that you're still lying, still seeing her, and still expecting me to forgive you as if you spilled wine on the carpet, rather than destroyed our marriage. Edward ran a hand through his unkempt hair, frustration replacing his initial contrition. This isn't fair. You orchestrated that whole scene to humiliate me in front of my family. Do you have any idea what that's done to my relationship with my parents? My father won't even speak to me. And whose fault is that? Ashley shot back, her calm facade cracking slightly. You brought another woman into our bed, Edward. What did you expect me to do when I found out? Pretend it didn't happen? Smile and serve dinner while you continued your affair? I expected you to confront me privately, like a normal person, he shouted, not turn it into some twisted revenge plot. A neighbor across the street looked up from watering her garden, attention drawn by Edward's raised voice. Ashley lowered her own voice, not wanting to create a scene. You need to leave. We have nothing more to discuss without our lawyers present. This isn't over, Edward said, his tone suddenly cold. You think you can just throw me away after 2 years of marriage? Take my family? My home? You'll regret this, Ashley. The threat, however vague, sent a chill down her spine. Are you threatening me, Edward? He stepped back, seeming to realize how his words had sounded. No, of course not. I just meant, this isn't how our story is supposed to end. Our story ended the moment you invited Jessica into our bed, Ashley replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Goodbye, Edward. She closed the door firmly and locked it, listening as his footsteps retreated down the porch steps, and his car engine started with an aggressive rev. Only when the sound had faded completely did she allow herself to lean against the wall, legs suddenly weak with delayed adrenaline. The confrontation had left her shaken, but also strangely empowered. She had stood her ground, spoken her truth, and sent him away without giving in to his manipulation. Small victories, perhaps, but victories nonetheless. Ashley touched the spot where Martha's sapphire pendant would hang once she put it on. Then she straightened, squared her shoulders, and headed upstairs to begin packing up Edward's remaining clothes. The time for mourning what was lost had ended. Now it was time to discover what might be found in its place. As she folded his expensive shirts into boxes, Ashley caught sight of herself in the dresser mirror. Green eyes clear and focused, chestnut hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, expression determined rather than devastated. For the first time in a long while, she recognized the woman staring back at her. Ashley Powell was reclaiming her life, one painful but necessary step at a time. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Ashley's boots as she walked through the park, a steaming cup of pumpkin spice latte, warming her hands against the October chill. 6 months had passed since the night her marriage imploded in spectacular fashion. 6 months of lawyer meetings, property negotiations, tearful midnight phone calls with Bethany, and the slow, sometimes painful process of rediscovering herself. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago, relatively quick by legal standards thanks to the prenuptial agreement they had signed, and Edward's eventual realization that fighting would only drain his finances and further damage his already tattered reputation. In the end, Ashley kept the house and most of their joint assets, while Edward walked away with his personal belongings, his car, and what remained of his dignity. Ashley found a bench overlooking the duck pond and sat down, taking a moment to appreciate the vibrant red and gold foliage reflected in the water's surface. The sapphire pendant Martha had given her caught the autumn sunlight as she leaned forward. She wore it nearly every day now, a tangible reminder that family wasn't always defined by legal documents or shared last names. Her phone vibrated with an incoming text from Bethany. "Don't forget, Mom's birthday dinner tomorrow at 7. Nathan insists you help him bake the cake. Says only Aunt Ashley knows how to make the frosting right." Ashley smiled and sent back a quick reply. "Wouldn't miss it. Tell Nathan I'll bring the special sprinkles." The relationship with Edward's family, now officially her ex-husband's family, though they rarely acknowledged him as such these days, had only grown stronger in the aftermath of the divorce. Martha and Will had embraced her as their daughter in every way that mattered, while Bethany had become the sister Ashley had always wished for. And Nathan? Sweet Nathan, with his gap-toothed smile and endless questions, had filled a space in her heart she hadn't realized was empty. A notification from her real estate app interrupted her reflections. Curious, she opened it to find that a house she had been monitoring had just reduced its price. It was a charming Victorian on Maple Street, slightly smaller than her current home, but with a generous backyard and, most importantly, no memories of Edward lurking in its corners. She had been considering a move for months, torn between the comfort of her grandmother's beloved home and the appeal of a completely fresh start. The house on Maple Street wasn't far from Martha and Will's neighborhood, which would make family visits easier, and its previous owners had converted part of the ground floor into a home office. Perfect for the consulting business Ashley had launched 3 months ago, leveraging her marketing expertise to help small local businesses. The career change had been terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. After 15 years in corporate marketing, stepping away to build something entirely her own had required a courage she hadn't been sure she possessed. But with each new client, each successful campaign, her confidence grew. For the first time in her professional life, she answered to no one but herself. No demanding bosses, no office politics, and certainly no husband questioning why she needed to work late. Ashley saved the listing to discuss with her realtor later and checked the time. She had a client meeting in an hour and still needed to stop by her office to collect the presentation materials. As she stood to leave, a familiar voice called her name, sending an unexpected jolt through her system. "Ashley! Ashley Powell!" She turned to see Jessica Palmer walking toward her, bundled in a camel-colored coat, her blonde hair shorter than Ashley remembered. The younger woman stopped a few feet away, uncertainty written across her features. "Jessica," Ashley acknowledged coolly, instinctively straightening to her full height. "This is unexpected." Jessica shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse strap with gloved hands. "I wasn't sure you'd even speak to me," she admitted. "But when I saw you sitting here, I thought maybe it was a sign that I should finally apologize properly." Ashley studied the woman who had contributed to the destruction of her marriage. Jessica looked different somehow. Less polished, more authentic, with minimal makeup and none of the calculated sexiness Ashley remembered from their previous encounters. "You want to apologize?" Ashley repeated flatly. "Now? After 6 months?" Jessica nodded, her expression contrite. "I know it's too little, too late, and you have every right to tell me to go to hell. But I've been in therapy, working on understanding why I make such self-destructive choices, and my therapist suggested that making amends might help. Not just you, but me too." She paused, then added hastily, "Though I completely understand if you don't want to hear it." Against her better judgment, Ashley found herself curious. "I have a few minutes," she said, gesturing to the bench she had just vacated. They sat with a careful distance between them, both women staring at the pond rather than at each other. After a moment of awkward silence, Jessica spoke. "What I did was inexcusable," she began quietly. "I knew Edward was married. I knew he was lying to you. I told myself it was just physical, that no one would get hurt if no one found out." She shook her head ruefully. "The lies we tell ourselves to justify what we know is wrong." Ashley remained silent, allowing Jessica to continue without interruption. "When we were discovered that way by his entire family, Jessica closed her eyes briefly, as if the memory still pained her. It was the most humiliating moment of my life, but it was also a wake-up call. I saw myself through their eyes, not as the desirable other woman, but as the pathetic homewrecker in someone else's bed. She turned slightly toward Ashley. Edward and I continued seeing each other for a few weeks after that night. Did you know that? Yes, Ashley replied, thinking of Martha's revelation over lunch all those months ago. I heard. Jessica nodded. He was different after that night. Angry, bitter, drinking too much. He blamed you for everything. The public humiliation, his parents' rejection, even his struggles at work. Never himself, of course. She twisted her gloved hands in her lap. One night, he got drunk and started talking about how he was going to make you pay for what you'd done to him. That's when I realized I was involved with someone truly toxic. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air ran through Ashley. Did he threaten me specifically? Nothing explicit, Jessica clarified quickly. Just angry drunk talk about ruining your reputation the way you'd ruined his. But it scared me enough to end things. I told him we were done, that I was moving on. She laughed without humor. He didn't take it well, started showing up at my apartment unannounced, calling at all hours, sending flowers one day and nasty texts the next. That sounds familiar, Ashley murmured, remembering Edward's erratic behavior during the divorce proceedings. I had to threaten a restraining order before he finally backed off, Jessica continued. Last I heard, he moved to Chicago for a fresh start. She glanced at Ashley. I'm sorry if that's news to you. Ashley shook her head. We haven't spoken in months. The divorce was handled mostly through our lawyers. They fell silent again, watching a family of ducks glide across the pond's surface. The child in Ashley, that had once dreamed of motherhood, whispered its familiar ache, but the sensation was duller now, tempered by time and perspective. I want you to know, Jessica said eventually, that I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you. Not because I got caught, or because it ended badly for me too, but because what I did was wrong. Period. She stood up, smoothing her coat. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. Ashley remained seated, processing the unexpected apology. As Jessica turned to leave, she found herself speaking. I've spent a lot of time being angry with Edward, and with you, she said thoughtfully. But recently, I've realized that what happened, it set me free in many ways. I was living someone else's version of my life, compromising parts of myself I shouldn't have. She looked up at Jessica. I'm not thanking you for the affair. That was still wrong. But I am acknowledging that sometimes painful endings lead to necessary beginnings. Jessica's eyes widened slightly at Ashley's philosophical response. That's incredibly gracious of you. Ashley shrugged. It's not about grace. It's about moving forward. She stood, gathering her purse and coffee cup. I hope your therapy helps you make better choices, Jessica. It already has, Jessica replied with a small smile. Take care, Ashley. As Jessica walked away, Ashley felt an unexpected lightness, as if she had set down a burden she hadn't realized she was still carrying. Forgiveness, she was discovering, benefited the forgiver as much as the forgiven. With renewed energy, Ashley headed to her car, deciding to call her realtor immediately about the house on Maple Street. It was time for that fresh start, in more ways than one. The client meeting went exceptionally well, with the local bookstore owner enthusiastically approving Ashley's marketing strategy for their upcoming holiday campaign. By the time she returned home that evening, she had scheduled a viewing of the Maple Street house for the following morning and prepared dinner with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in months. After eating, Ashley settled on her living room sofa with a glass of wine and her tablet, intending to review some work emails before bed. Instead, she found herself drawn to the adoption agency website she had bookmarked weeks ago, but hadn't had the courage to explore fully. The desire for a child had been a constant companion throughout her adult life, even after learning in her 30s that medical issues would make natural conception nearly impossible. Edward had known about her infertility before they married and had claimed to be comfortable with adoption or fostering someday. Someday, that nebulous future that never seemed to arrive during their brief marriage. Now, as a single woman of 43, the conventional paths to motherhood seemed increasingly remote. Yet the longing persisted, especially when she spent time with Nathan, witnessing his innocent joy and boundless curiosity about the world. "Maybe it's time," she whispered to herself, clicking through the adoption information pages with growing resolution. Single-parent adoptions were challenging, but not impossible, particularly for older children who were harder to place. Her financial stability, home ownership, and flexible work schedule would all count in her favor. A notification popped up on her phone. An email from her realtor confirming tomorrow's viewing at 9:30. Ashley took it as a sign. If she liked the house on Maple Street, if it felt right, perhaps it would become not just her fresh start, but a home for a child who needed one too. With this hopeful thought warming her more effectively than the wine, Ashley closed her tablet and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new decisions, new steps forward on this unexpected path. The morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp autumn day that hinted at winter's approach. Ashley dressed with care for the house viewing, choosing a burgundy sweater that brought out the auburn highlights in her hair and comfortable boots that could handle the fallen leaves. Martha called as she was heading out the door. "Good luck with the house, dear. Will and I can't wait to hear all about it at dinner tonight." "I'll take lots of pictures," Ashley promised, touched by her former mother-in-law's enthusiasm. "How are the birthday preparations coming along?" "Oh, you know Will," Martha chuckled. "He thinks I don't know about the surprise bracelet he bought, even though he's the worst secret keeper in 3 counties. They chatted for a few more minutes before Ashley had to leave for her appointment. As she drove to Maple Street, she mentally rehearsed the questions she wanted to ask the realtor about the property taxes, the roof's age, the neighborhood school district. The last consideration was new, a tacit acknowledgement of her evolving plans. The Victorian house was even more charming in person than in the online photos. Pale yellow with white trim and a wraparound porch complete with swing, it exuded a warmth and welcome that Ashley felt the moment she stepped onto the property. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Diane, greeted her with a firm handshake. "Wait until you see the backyard," Diane enthused as she unlocked the front door. "It's one of the largest in the neighborhood, with mature apple trees and a garden area that gets wonderful southern exposure." The interior didn't disappoint either. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, updated kitchen and bathrooms that respected the home's Victorian character while providing modern conveniences. The home office on the ground floor featured built-in bookshelves and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms offered plenty of space, including a cozy room with sloped ceilings that would make a perfect nursery or child's bedroom. Ashley found herself mentally arranging furniture, planning paint colors, imagining Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations in these rooms. It felt right in a way her current house, beautiful as it was, hadn't in a long time. "I'd like to make an offer," she told Diane before they had even completed the tour. "This is the one." Diane looked pleasantly surprised. "Are you sure? Don't you want to think about it overnight?" Ashley shook her head, surprising herself with her certainty. "Sometimes you just know." They returned to Diane's office to prepare the paperwork. As Ashley signed the offer documents, she felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervous anticipation. This house represented more than just a change of address. It was a declaration of intent, a commitment to the future she was choosing for herself. On the drive to Martha's birthday dinner that evening, Ashley's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She answered via Bluetooth, expecting a work call. "Is this Ashley Powell?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "Ms. Powell, this is Patricia Morales from Bright Horizons Adoption Services. We received your initial inquiry form and would like to schedule a time for you to come in for an information session." Your background as described seems particularly well-suited for our older child adoption program." Ashley's heart raced as she gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yes, I'd be very interested in that. When is your next available session?" They scheduled a meeting for the following week, and Ashley ended the call feeling as though the universe was aligning in her favor. First the house offer, now this promising contact from the adoption agency. After months of uncertainty and pain, life was suddenly accelerating in unexpected and exciting ways. The Cooper family home blazed with welcoming lights as Ashley pulled into the driveway. Before she could even exit her car, Nathan burst through the front door and ran down the path to greet her, his small face alight with excitement. "Aunt Ashley, did you bring the special sprinkles? Mom said we have to wait for you to start the cake." Ashley laughed, reaching into her purse for the container of rainbow sprinkles she had promised. "Right here, buddy. Ready to be the best baker's assistant ever?" Nathan nodded seriously, taking the sprinkles with the reverence only a 6-year-old could muster for such a treasure. "Grandma doesn't know about the cake. It's a big surprise, so shh." He put his finger to his lips dramatically. "My lips are sealed," Ashley promised, allowing him to take her hand and lead her into the house where Martha, Will, and Bethany waited, with open arms and loving hearts. This was her family now, not by blood or by marriage, but by choice and love. And soon, perhaps, it would grow in ways she had only dared to dream about. 1 year later, Ashley Powell stood in the kitchen of her yellow Victorian home on Maple Street, sunlight streaming through the windows as she placed the final candle on a chocolate birthday cake. The blue number 5 candle stood proudly in the center, surrounded by a galaxy of rainbow sprinkles. Outside, the October afternoon glowed with autumn colors, the backyard apple trees heavy with ripe fruit waiting to be harvested. "Is it time yet?" Nathan called from the living room, where he was helping his mother, Bethany, hang streamers across the fireplace mantel. "Almost," Ashley replied, carefully lifting the cake onto a vintage serving plate. "Why don't you check if Alan is ready?" At the sound of his name, a small figure appeared in the kitchen doorway. Alan Powell, with his serious brown eyes and cowlick of dark hair that refused to stay flat, clutched a stuffed dinosaur to his chest as he watched Ashley with quiet intensity. In the 11 months since he had come to live with her, first as a foster child, and then, as of 3 weeks ago, officially as her adopted son, Alan had transformed from a painfully shy, traumatized 4-year-old into a cautiously optimistic 5-year-old who was beginning to trust that this home and this mother might actually be permanent. "Hey, buddy," Ashley said softly, setting down the cake to kneel at his eye level. "The guests will be here soon. Are you excited for your very first birthday party?" Alan nodded solemnly, then whispered, "Will they really bring presents just for me?" The question squeezed Ashley's heart. According to his case file, Alan had never had a proper birthday celebration during his years in the foster care system, shuttled between 5 different homes before finding his way to Ashley. When she had learned his 5th birthday was approaching, she had immediately begun planning the celebration he deserved, determined to create the kind of magical childhood memory most people took for granted. "Yes, sweetheart, all the presents are just for you, because today is your special day," she assured him, gently smoothing his stubborn cowlick. "And Grandma Martha and Grandpa Will are bringing the biggest surprise of all." Alan's eyes widened. "Bigger than the dinosaur books Aunt Bethany showed me on her phone?" Ashley laughed. "Even bigger. But it's a surprise, so you'll have to wait and see." The doorbell rang, sending Nathan racing through the house with a whoop of excitement. "They're here! They're here!" Martha and Will Cooper entered bearing colorfully wrapped packages and warm embraces. At 68, Martha remained elegant and vibrant, her silver hair swept into a stylish bob, while Will's tall frame had begun to stoop slightly with age, though his sharp blue eyes missed nothing. "There's the birthday boy!" Martha exclaimed, setting down her packages to open her arms to Alan. After a moment's hesitation, Physical affection was still something he was learning to accept. Alan stepped forward for a hug. "Happy birthday, young man," Will said gruffly, presenting a large box wrapped in paper covered with cartoon dinosaurs. "This one might need to stay outside, though." Alan accepted the gift with wide eyes, looking questioningly at Ashley for permission to open it. "Why don't we take it to the backyard?" she suggested, recognizing the telltale shape of the child-sized bicycle they had discussed getting for him. "You can open this one early, before everyone else arrives." The small family procession moved through the house to the backyard, where autumn leaves created a golden carpet on the lawn. With shaking fingers, Alan carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a shiny blue bicycle with training wheels and a basket shaped like a Tyrannosaurus head. "It's for me?" he whispered, touching the handlebar reverently. "My very own? Every kid needs a bike," Will said, his gruff voice softening as he watched the child's face. "And I'm going to teach you to ride it, just like I taught Nathan last year." Alan looked from the bicycle to Will to Ashley, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning joy. Then, in a move that brought tears to Ashley's eyes, he spontaneously threw his arms around Will's legs. "Thank you, Grandpa," he said, the words muffled against Will's khakis. Will cleared his throat, clearly emotional as he patted the boy's back. "You're welcome, son." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of more guests. Neighbors, friends from Alan's new preschool, Ashley's clients who had become friends, and Patricia Morales from the adoption agency, who had championed Ashley's case through the complex process of becoming Alan's forever mother. The backyard filled with laughter and conversation as children explored the play equipment Ashley had installed over the summer. A swing set, sandbox, and small climbing frame had transformed the once formal garden into a child's paradise. Nathan, taking his role as big cousin very seriously, showed Alan how to properly swing all the way to the sky. Bethany sidled up to Ashley as she watched the children play. "Look at him," she said softly. "Remember how he wouldn't even look us in the eye when you first brought him home? Now he's laughing. You did that, Ash. You gave him his childhood back." Ashley blinked back tears. "We did it. All of us. He needed a family, not just a mother." She squeezed Bethany's hand. "I couldn't have done this without you, you know. Those first few months when he had nightmares every night, when he wouldn't speak, having you on speed dial saved my sanity." "That's what sisters are for," Bethany replied simply, bumping Ashley's shoulder with her own. The party progressed with all the traditional elements, games in the yard, the slightly off-key singing of "Happy Birthday," Alan's look of wonder as he blew out his candles and made a wish. Ashley documented everything with her camera, determined to fill a photo album with evidence of this perfect day, proof for both Alan and herself that dreams really could come true. As the afternoon waned and guests began to depart, Martha approached Ashley with a small velvet box. "We have one more gift," she said quietly. "This one's for both of you." Inside the box lay 2 identical silver bracelets, one adult-sized, one sized for a child's wrist. Each was engraved with a simple message: "Family forever." "Oh, Martha," Ashley breathed, running her finger over the delicate engraving. "They're beautiful. Will and I had them custom-made," Martha explained. "The jeweler thought it was for a mother and daughter at first. I told him it was even more special, for a mother and son who chose each other." Ashley hugged her former mother-in-law tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had remained her champion through the darkest days of her life, and now shared in its brightest moments. "Should we put them on now?" Martha suggested, nodding toward Alan, who was carefully arranging his new presents under Nathan's supervision. Ashley nodded and called Alan over. Kneeling before him, she showed him the matching bracelets. "Grandma and Grandpa had these made specially for us," she explained. "See how they match? One for you and one for me." Alan touched the smaller bracelet with gentle fingers. "What do the words say?" "Family forever," Ashley read, watching his face carefully. "Because that's what we are now." Forever. The significance wasn't lost on him, young as he was. After spending most of his short life in temporary situations, the concept of forever held special weight. His lower lip trembled slightly. "Even when I have bad dreams?" he asked in a small voice. "Even when I get angry and break things?" Ashley cupped his face in her hands, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "Especially then," she promised. "Family is forever, through good days and hard days. Nothing will ever change that. You are my son, Alan Powell, and I am your mother, always and forever." Alan's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the tears of fear and confusion she had wiped away during those difficult early months. These were tears of relief, of acceptance, of finally believing in the permanence of love. "Can I put it on now?" he asked, holding out his small wrist. Ashley fastened the bracelet carefully, then held out her own wrist so he could attempt to fasten hers, his little fingers working with intense concentration until he managed to close the clasp. "There," he said proudly. "Now everyone can see we're family." "Yes," Ashley agreed, blinking back her own tears. "Now everyone can see." Later that evening, after the guests had departed and Alan had fallen asleep surrounded by new toys, Ashley sat on her porch swing with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Martha had insisted on staying to help clean up, and she now joined Ashley on the swing, the chains creaking softly as they swayed. "Penny for your thoughts," Martha said, settling her cardigan around her shoulders against the autumn chill. Ashley smiled. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from what I imagined 2 years ago." "Regrets?" Martha asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Not one," Ashley replied firmly. "If Edward hadn't betrayed me, if I hadn't found the courage to expose that betrayal and walk away, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I wouldn't have this beautiful house, this fulfilling career." She paused, looking through the window to where Alan's nightlight cast a gentle glow in his dinosaur-themed bedroom. "I wouldn't have my son?" Martha followed her gaze, her expression softening. "Sometimes, the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be. I used to think happiness meant following a specific script, marriage, career, children, in that traditional order," Ashley mused. "Now I realize happiness is about authenticity, living truthfully, loving openly, and having the courage to change course when necessary. And you've done all three," Martha said proudly. "When I think of how that awful night could have ended differently, if you'd forgiven Edward out of fear or obligation, if you'd walked away from all of us out of pride," she shuddered slightly. "Instead, look what you've created. A family bound by choice rather than obligation. A home built on honesty rather than convenience." Ashley touched the sapphire pendant at her throat, Martha's gift from those early, painful days, then glanced at the silver bracelet on her wrist that matched the one her son wore as he slept peacefully for the first time on his birthday. These tangible symbols of belonging, of being chosen, meant more to her than the diamond ring Edward had placed on her finger in another lifetime. "I received a letter from Edward last week," she said quietly, "forwarded through my lawyer." Martha stiffened slightly. What did he want? To apologize, apparently. "He's engaged again. Some woman he met in Chicago. He said he's grown as a person and wanted to clear the negative energy between us before starting his new life." Ashley shook her head with a small, disbelieving laugh. 2 years later, and he's still thinking primarily of himself. "Did you respond?" Martha asked cautiously. Ashley smiled, watching a shooting star streak across the night sky. "No, there's nothing left to say. I wish him well, truly, but he's part of a story that's finished, while I'm in the middle of one that's just beginning." She touched her bracelet again. "Family forever. That's the only promise that matters now." Inside the house, the faint sound of Alan calling out in his sleep reached them. Ashley was on her feet instantly, maternal instinct overriding everything else. "Go," Martha said softly. "Your son needs you." Ashley hurried inside to Alan's room, where he was sitting up in bed, clutching his dinosaur, eyes wide with the remnants of a dream. When he saw her, he reached out immediately, all earlier hesitation forgotten. "Mommy," he said, the word still new enough to send a thrill through her heart. "I dreamed you were gone." "I'm right here," Ashley assured him, gathering him into her arms. "I'm not going anywhere. Ever." Alan touched the silver bracelet on his wrist, then reached for hers, as if confirming they still matched. "Family forever," he repeated, the words becoming a talisman against his fears. "That's right," Ashley whispered, kissing his forehead as he settled back against his pillows. "Forever and always." She stayed until his breathing deepened into sleep, his small hand still clutching hers, the matching bracelets catching the glow of the nightlight. In that peaceful moment, surrounded by the home she had created, and holding the child who had completed her family in a way she had never anticipated, Ashley felt the final pieces of her heart knit themselves back together. The path to this moment had been marked by betrayal and pain, by difficult choices and courageous stands. But sitting here in the quiet of her son's room, watching over his dreams, Ashley knew with absolute certainty that every tear, every confrontation, every moment of fear and uncertainty had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Sometimes, she reflected, the most beautiful endings grew from the most painful beginnings. And sometimes, what seemed like an ending was actually the first chapter of a far better story, one written not by expectation or convention, but by courage, truth, and an open heart. Outside, the autumn wind whispered through the apple trees, dislodging leaves that danced like possibilities in the moonlight. Inside, mother and child breathed in unison, connected by love, by choice, by silver bracelets that proclaimed what both now knew to be true, beyond any doubt. Family forever. Not just words, but a promise kept. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.